Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C podcast. We are thrilled to be here at O3C Games. My name is Jonathan Dunn and I'm joined by Chris Dow.
Full of potato and leek soup.
And we are going around the world in 80 games.
Woo!
All right, announcement. Before we dive into our next Brazil-orientated episode, we just wanted to point you in the Rio de direction of a couple of things. Even with the build-up, was that still worth it?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, please do join us in the O3C Discord to chat with us and all the other wonderful fellows and felons in there about the podcast, gaming, films, TV, music, all manner of other things. There is a link to join the server on our website, o3c.games. While you're on the website, do also check out the support page that we have there, which is a brilliant way to help us keep the show going if you are enjoying what we're doing. You can chuck us a few quid on PayPal to keep the lights on. You can pledge a regular donation via Patreon, and there are also handy links to help share the podcast on your social media platforms. Any and indeed all of those options would be enormously appreciated by these two bespectacled, bearded wonder men. There we go. Rio de direction.
That's a good
stupid.
one. That's a good one.
It's so stupid. Hello and happy May to all of you lovely listeners, and indeed to your lovely face, Mr. Dow. Sorry.
Hello, thank you.
Mr. Dow.
No crossover.
No crossover. Dreadful.
No crossover.
April has been and gone, and all of the tipsy-turvy April showery weather is behind us, thankfully, as all of those sudden fluctuations in pressure, temperature and humidity do a right old swizzle upon my noggin. But sunny times await, and indeed sunny climes, in this month's episode as we are heading to the gorgeous, bounteous land of Brazil to explore their gaming output, and I cannot wait. I absolutely cannot wait. Do you know what? If I was to make a game, maybe this could become a new section. If I was to make a game in or about Brazil, I would love to see a GTA-like game based on Fernando Morelos' City of God. Wouldn't that be horribly intense?
I'm
surprised that hasn't been made, to be honest, because maybe it's a bit too because it's so true to life. Well, you know, from my own experience in the slums of Rio, it's very true to life. It's almost verging on documentary. Maybe that's a bit too insensitive to sort of glamorize that.
I think if I was to make a game based on Brazil, it would be a kind of Pilot Wings alike, and it would just be doing stunts around Christ the Redeemer.
One level, that's it. I like that.
Yeah.
Wait, before we talk about, more things, Brazil, let's catch each other up on our latest month's gaming activities. Chris, why don't you give me your headlines?
I would like to use my little headline space this week I would like to use my little headline space this month to offer a PSA. I realise this will apply to very, very, very few people out there in regular people land. But if you are a perpetual tinkerer like me, who likes to fuck about with their Steam Deck or retro handheld or Raspberry Pi or whatever, please, 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 please keep a little note somewhere of things you may have installed or updated or rolled back, lest you have a weekend like mine where I tangled my own emulator setup into such a rubber band ball that nothing would load and I could not work out how to fix it.
This is why I don't tinker. This is why.
It's so aggravating. Like, I sat down, and this is not a lie, and Georgie will attest to this, from 3 or 4 in the afternoon when I discovered this was a problem, until almost 2 in the morning, just Googling cryptic error messages and picking through crash logs and firing thoughts back and forth with one of the EmuDeck developers on Discord, all to precisely no avail. Absolutely zero avail. Saturday morning after this Friday, I woke up early and just said, "Fuck it, right? I'm just going to factory reset the whole thing. I can't see what the solution is." And it's now Tuesday at time of recording, and whilst the emulation station Battleship is not quite back to where I had it, everything now works. I've filled most gaps. We're back to where we'd like to be, pretty much.
There we go.
Just keep a log. boys and girls. Like, just keep a log. More critically, and this is inevitably what the problem was. If you're planning to install like new dependencies and drivers to try and get other things working, kind of willy-nilly, in Linux this is, at least look into whether the things you're blindly typing into the console are reversible. Because this could have been something that I had changed and shifted 2 years ago at this point. Because when I got my OLED deck, I just did a complete duplicate of the system as well.
Yeah.
So it could be something I used to fix a problem in the first week of owning this machine that has now carried on 2 years into the future and just ruined my weekend.
That's
so
mad.
Yeah, fucking idiot. Just don't do it.
Can you like upload your build to like GitHub or something like that so that it will just always keep an iterative version of it?
I guess so. I guess so. I mean, the problem with all this stuff, and the main thing I was really, really cheesed off that I deleted in my haste to fix things, my emulation library, I have meticulously kind of resourced all of the images and metadata and stuff for all of my ROMs. So it's like picking through a library of 50,000 games. Everything is catalogued properly. And that is kept in a file, and that's kept in a whole series of things. And you know, it's all on there in a folder. And when I reinstalled EmuDeck as a first port of call, I didn't realise that would be wiped. So
oh no.
That was such a big job, because that's not only just the data. It's not just pressing, can I have the images again, please? So much of it was I had manually edited titles. I'd manually made artwork for games that were missing them. Like, it's a serious job. And that I obviously have not plugged in and fixed yet. But yeah, it's something to do for the next 2 years, isn't it? Something to keep me going as I approach 40.
Makes me sad.
Makes me sadder.
Yeah.
It made me sadder. But yeah, there you go. It is what it is. What it is a waste of my time.
Is that your only headline?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Well, I've got a ton of headlines.
Obviously.
Well, you say obviously, but here we go. My first headline. I've come to a natural close. I say that. I wrote this, and already it's bullshit. I thought I'd come to a natural close to my time with Balatro for now.
Yeah.
I've beaten runs with all of the decks. I've cleared a gold stake difficulty run with a couple of them. I've unlocked all of the jokers. I've now completed all the challenges in the game, and every single second of this game has been a pure delight. And as a rate of delight per second, this means that I experienced over 7,000 units of delight in my 120 hours of play.
Jesus.
Even the final challenge, which sees you needing to win an entire run without any jokers at all, which probably took me about 20 hours of attempts, actually wasn't unenjoyable. It's a miraculous game. There's a big update on its way that's rebalancing the game in a whole host of ways, and I've still got most difficulty stakes to attempt with most of the decks, so there's still tons of content still for me to enjoy when I pick it back up, and I have already just picked it back up just to start chipping away at it. It's amazing. Next headline is that I have bought a new house, and in doing so, have had
That's
to...
quite a headline.
Yeah. In doing so, I've had to drastically slash my spending habits. This has seen me trawling through my library of already owned games to play. More on that in a bit. But also have a look at some of the free-to-play games available on the App Store. Now, we all love an idle game, don't we?
Yeah.
What do we love more than an idle game? An idle game that doesn't pressure you into spending money on it.
Yes.
What do we love more than an idle game that doesn't pressure you into spending money on it? An idle game that doesn't allow you to spend money on it. Because fortunately, Netflix games, like Apple Arcade games, has a hard and fast rule that the games can't contain freemium-like content and microtransactions. So I've been having a very nice time clicking my way through Cats and Soup, an adorable idle game that is beautifully presented, and it ticks all of the boxes you would expect an idle game to tick, and it's just so nice not feeling the burden of potentially dipping into my pocket to speed things up, and I can just relax and enjoy watching the numbers all go very, very slowly in the right direction.
Yeah.
Another game that I also picked up through Netflix games is a really fun puzzle game called Slay Away Camp 2. I did check out Slay Away Camp 1, and it's a bit of a nothingy sort of game. Slay Away Camp 2 is essentially a Sokoban-style, tile-based, moving blocks puzzle game, but it's all presented in a brilliant B-movie style where instead of blocks and obstacles, you are a serial killer or a monster trying to trap and kill campers in the woods and other environments. Its presentation is just so brilliant, and it's totally lent into its Netflix allegiance by presenting all of the levels and stages as movies to watch on Netflix, and they're all silly twists on classic horror B-movie tropes, like you've got Lawnmower Massacre 3, The Final Mowdown, or the beast that comes out of the bog sometimes to kill you, and crazy old coot with a sword off. It's all just really, really well designed. It's really well made. It's great fun to play. It's got loads of different mechanics that it introduces over its course of levels. There's loads of levels, loads of challenges. There's a nifty little rewind button, so you can just backtrack your steps if you make an error or you just want to adjust something without having to totally restart the whole level. And very nicely with a puzzle game, its hint system is basically handed over to the player to be in control of. So with a tap of the hint button, it can give you a little clue as to a couple of moves to maybe get you started or to aim to, to implement. But at any time, if you wish to, or if you need to, you can just preview the solution to the level as well. So if you're totally stuck and it saves you having to look up the solution on YouTube, it just makes for a really nice contained experience. And it sees me putting in extended playtime into the game rather than dipping in and out of it. So if you're subscribed to Netflix, do check out their games on offer, which is just a growing, phenomenal library now with some, genuine masterpiece games in there, like Hades, which has recently been added. But perhaps check out Slay Away Camp 2 or Cats and Soup.
Soup. Is it big chunks?
It's big chunks time, Chris. It's big chunk. We're flying through this already, it feels like.
Yeah.
What have you put some sizable time into then this month, Chris?
A game that I played to full completion, it's not very long, is called Metropolis Lux Obscura. And it's a match 3 puzzle game with very light RPG elements.
Okay.
And it's wrapped up in a pulpy film noir sort of graphic novel presentation that is very much riffing on Frank Miller's Sin City. Like, so hard it almost feels like plagiarism. But that's the style they've gone for. The gameplay itself is...
I don't think Frank Miller owns the rights to black and white.
No, but it's the way he draws as well. It's pretty blatant. The gameplay itself is less bejeweled and more like the classic mobile games 1 billion and you must build a boat, because the icons you drag around, you can move any way up and down like a constituent column or row instead of just to an adjacent tile like up or down. So it's a slightly different strategy. And the RPG light stuff comes from stat boosts and upgrades that you choose after each battle that then persist for your playthrough. Because it's quite a short game, there's multiple endings, you're trying to get them all essentially. It gives a bit more incentive as well outside of those story endings to play again, because you might change your build slightly as you go back in and it might make it a little bit different. But there is nothing out of the ordinary here. But it's a decent time. Each run to the credits is only about an hour or so. And I beat all of the endings. You know, the writing is so-so. It's a bit adolescent, but that criticism can kind of be levelled at a lot of Frank Miller's later work as well. Like, see any of his film contributions outside of maybe the first Sin City adaptation.
Yeah.
Or, if you're into graphic novels, the truly horrible and almost certainly Islamophobic graphic novel called Holy Terror that he did a few years ago that was... It was bad. It was bad.
Let's not spend time promoting that.
No. In Metropolis, it feels a bit more naive rather than kind of like nasty. And it's further compounded by the script definitely being written by a team with English as an additional language. But in saying that, the most recent game developed by this team at Cthulhu Solutions is called, I'm not joking, you can look it up on Steam, Jerry Wanker and the Quest to Get Laid. So maybe I'm giving them a bit more credit than they deserve here.
Jeez.
My main take home, though, after reaching all the endings on this game, after a few days of play, was just, boy howdy, I'd really like to play Puzzle Quest again. And so that's what I went on to do. That's what I'm doing now. Like, I own Puzzle Quest across a few different platforms. I beat it and pretty much all of its main sequels and spin-offs 100% on the Xbox 360. This is kind of the era they were really popular. But on this occasion, I've decided to play the PSP version via emulation because it had an achievement set developed for it on old retroachievements.com, my favourite site on the internet. The thing that Puzzle Quest does brilliantly, and it hasn't dulled one bit since it was first released way back in 2007, is it takes the match 3 genre, a genre that can sometimes feel a bit mean and driven by chance, And in the same way that Shatter did when we discussed it last month, it gives you a lot of player agency. So, as an example of what it does better than most, in battles in Metropolis, an enemy may attack, dealing fixed damage every 2 moves. And your options to mitigate that damage are to either hope for a big cascade of gems that means the enemy is defeated before they even get a turn, or build up your defense enough to kind of absorb some of that attack, because you're getting hit either way. It's just every 2 turns, you will lose this much health, and that's how it works. As the enemy doesn't directly influence the board either, they are kind of just like an abstract number rather than an active opponent. Whereas in Puzzle Quest, you are trading turns with the enemy. Like, you take a turn, they take a turn, and so forth. And every single match then has to be considered, because going for a certain colour mana gem might mean that the enemy then has the opportunity to attack you directly because they didn't get that, or go for something else, or you move something into position that they can then make use of. So you've got to think, is it worth collecting those gems? Or am I trying to sort of stockpile to use some of my spells, which work differently? Or can I make the enemy skip a turn? Or should I be attacking directly? And there's just a lot of strategy to it. And it's really nice to think that, it is just a matching puzzle game, but it's a matching puzzle game that you have a lot of agency over how you approach it and how you actually tackle these battles. It makes it feel like an RPG. That's the whole point of it, isn't it? There's something you can do each turn as opposed to just being at the whim of the board. It's obviously not as deep as something like chess, where people are still refining and studying strategies like thousands of years on. And the AI can still make some real bonehead plays sometimes that make you feel like, why did I bother this carefully considered approach? Because they didn't even make the move I thought they'd do. But it still feels engaging in a way that most of this kind of RPG puzzle subgenre doesn't. If anyone out there wants to play Puzzle Quest today but doesn't want to resort to emulation, the Switch port is probably the best way to play these days, because it collects the original game, the 360 and PS3 exclusive DLC, and it has a further Switch exclusive package of DLC as well. So it's a good place to play. Some of the upscaled art is coming essentially from the PSP version. It looks a bit dross on the Switch. They didn't do a very good job at kind of cleaning it up. But still, gameplay is king in Puzzle Quest in a game like this. And this absolutely would have been the way I chose to play if it wasn't for Georgia becoming obsessed with the game on the Switch, that I will mention a bit later on. But I will say, I have not been able to touch the Switch for most of the last month.
There we go. I didn't... Yeah. Well... Yeah, find out. Disney Dreamlight Valley.
It is, yeah.
So before I chat about a game I've played this month, I want to talk about something else games related that I've enjoyed this last month, and that is Amazon Prime's brand new TV adaptation of the Fallout games.
Oh, Goggins.
Goggins, yeah. Good Goggins. Have you watched it, by the way?
No.
Okay, fine. It's please do, because it's brilliant.
Yeah.
A Fallout TV show of some kind or another has been in development for a long time, and it took Jonathan Nolan, who showran Westworld, and also co-wrote several of his brother's films like The Prestige and The Dark Knight and Interstellar. It took his vision and executive producing to finally make a Fallout adaptation happen. And it's easy to see the appeal of adapting these games because of just how open and fully realised the game world is. You could very easily adapt any of the multitude of storylines from any of the Fallout games and make something worth watching. But you could also pick a little unexplored corner of this world and tell a new story, which is sort of what the TV show chooses to do, weaving in lots of little references to the games and their storylines into the wider world development around this original story and original characters. And it's just a real success. One of the things... I'm so tired. One of the great things about the Fallout games is the tone that the games have. They delight in having wildly conflicting tones between the wildly different factions at play. Inside the vaults, you've got this 50s pastiche, happy utopian facade hiding the darkness behind their situation. Then outside in the wastelands, you've got the bludgeoning, blinkered military mindset of the Brotherhood of Steel. Then you've got the warped ideals of the inhabitants of this new world that has somehow survived nuclear war by resorting to all kinds of barbaric behaviours. Warped ideals matched by their warped appearances as mutations and genetic experimentation has run wild. then you have the harsh reality of what's happened to humanity staring you in the face everywhere you turn. There's a plane going over. Let me shut the window. I remember one of the most shocking things about Fallout 3 when I played that is you get this very cool, fun, and darkly humorous opening section in the vault where your character starts, and the excitement you get as you're let out of the vault to explore this wasteland with your gun in its holster and a backpack full of drugs. But then, only a few minutes later, you find a school with the remains of a classroom of burnt children still sat at their desks. And it's just this incredibly sobering vision just to remind you of like the reality of the situation. This balancing of tone in the Fallout TV show is largely done very effectively because you've got this triptych of main characters representing three of the main factions who interplay and clash their ideals with each other. I guess the main character would be the character of Lucy, who's the Vault Dweller daughter of Carl McLaughlin's captured overseer. She's literally and metaphorically wide-eyed with a head full of idealized optimism. Is harshly brought down to earth as she ventures into the wasteland. Then you've got Maximus, who is a soldier in the Brotherhood of Steel, who seizes the opportunity that's presented to him to fight back against the people who have trod on him. And topping it all off is Walton Goggins as a mutated gunslinging ghoul stalking the wastelands with a heart full of vengeance. And the way that these characters interact when their ideologies are diametrically opposed is just one of the many, many joys of this show, because the writing is top-notch, it's incredibly funny, and the performances are just fantastically realised as well. I think the Fallout show really nails what makes a good adaptation work, and that is having a fondness and a respect for its source material without being a slave to it, or having the desperation to flood its viewership with references and nods. And I think that must have also been the appeal to adapt this particular IP, because you can flood the background of this world with all the details that fans of the games will recognise, whilst also telling and crafting an entirely original story. The nods are there, and they're great. There's one line in particular that I loved, where Lucy, the Vault Dweller, tells Walton Goggins Ghoul that the golden rule of the Vault is do unto others as they would do unto you. And he responds that the golden rule of the wasteland is thou shalt get sidetracked by bullshit every goddamn time, which perfectly sums up the experience of any open world game.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spoil any story beats in the show, but I will say that I just had a brilliant time watching it. It's got loads of great twists and turns on the way, and I was worried that they might have blown the budget on its first episode because the visuals and the action and the effects are unbelievable. They had not spent all of the money on the first episode. It's kept up throughout. It's amazing to look at. The show ends with a brilliant tease of what's to come as well. The one thing I will say is it is extraordinarily and graphically violent. The kind that, if I'm in the right mood, I find it quite gleeful to watch because it's just totally ridiculous. But I know others who would find it difficult. But again, it's part and parcel of that extreme tone juggling that, I think makes this show a real success. I cannot wait for season 2, assuming season 2 is on the way. And it's even given me the inkling to give Fallout 4 another whirl, because I bounced off that quite hard when that came out. I found it just a bit, I don't know, which is weird because I've been looking forward to it for so long. It was very much the Skyrim to, Fallout 3 being Oblivion. It was like the next generation of, Bethesda thing. And there's a lot of good next gen stuff. But also it felt like it was all a bit hollow. But I've installed it. It's running really nicely on the Steam Deck, and
of course,
it's finally getting Fallout 4 is finally getting its next gen update for like PS5 support. So I might download it on that when that comes out in a couple of weeks' time. It'll be out by the time this episode comes out. But yeah, there we go. Fallout. It's great.
Oh, there's been quite a lot of TV and film adaptations of games now, hasn't there?
It's weird that like the headline leading the reviews of Fallout were another triumph in video game adaptation.
Yeah,
and that was not the headline even 5 years ago.
No, I mean we were talking about Detective Pikachu being like essentially a slam dunk for that conversion process
Yeah.
at the time. But that was not the norm. You know, I remember having that conversation and trying to think of other examples of stuff that we thought was successful and really struggling outside of niche things where it's like you saying, I enjoyed the Mortal Kombat films, even if they're dog shit kind of thing. You know, and that, you know, it's had a real about face, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just investment of good people. And I think just seeing that the audience is there and going, this is something worth investing in.
Yeah.
And if you invest the right people and give them Kate Blanchett with the money, then then good things can happen. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, right. I mentioned this game last episode, and since then I've played it for at least a good hour or so daily on the Steam Deck, and Georgia is now hooked on it too via its Switch port, and that is Disney Dreamlight Valley.
Yeah.
And, you know, I said last time up front, it's Disney-themed Animal Crossing, essentially. That was very much the MO on paper. But it does have some subtle changes which make it better in some ways, worse than others. But, you know, it's a different thing. It's not just a straight copy. The good stuff first, then. Dreamlight Valley was originally going to be paid early access with long-term free-to-play being the goal. And initial response was so positive that Gameloft, and this is the same Gameloft who have made their name almost exclusively with predatory free-to-play mobile games, they changed their course and said, no, we're keeping it as a premium paid experience. That seems to be what people have enjoyed. That's what we'll do. And that's a good thing, because so often games are forced to move in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Where, you know, even big names, they can only make money so far, and then publishers go, I mean, Destiny could be free-to-play, couldn't it? And then it becomes a more predatory thing where people are, you know, putting into money into cosmetics and everything else indefinitely to play a game. So it's nice that this has gone the other way. Initially, I was also a bit worried that the game would follow kind of the mobile mold of energy timers and speed up currencies and all that sort of stuff. But there's none of that here. Absolutely none of it. You know, if you plant a crop, it takes a few minutes to grow, and that's the time it takes to grow. There's no way to make it faster. It's just, that's how the game has been built around. If your avatar gets tired, you just eat a snack that you've made in your little kitchenette, or you chow down on one of the millions of edible treats that are scattered about the place, whether that's crops you've grown, things you find in situ as you wander about, or you just sit down on a bench and have a look around the world or potter about your house and your energy goes back up. So if you want to play for 24 hours straight, the game's not going to stop you. No, there's nothing there that says it's bedtime now, you're going to need to wait till tomorrow. You just carry on going. Missions are really plentiful. There's character-related storylines, there's quests in constant supply, there's further dreamlike duties, which are very similar to kind of the Nook Miles, like attrition-based achievements in New Horizons. And all of this stuff is present just to constantly give you little dopamine hits as you play. On the extremely rare occasions when a mission does ask you to wait maybe like a full day for something to happen, it actually feels quite impactful as opposed to frustrating, because it's not like, and now there's nothing else to do. You still probably have 45 missions to do on your log if you want to do other stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, oh, well, that must be a big deal then if this story beat takes a bit of time to develop. So it never feels like gated content just because it's a very active, hands-on game. And it's also one that straddles a nice balance between giving you a lot of choice for what to do whilst never actively forcing you to do any of it. And I think that's nice too. You know, when I play, I don't feel like I'm missing out because I'm not doing something else. It's just like, I think I'm just going to potter about and do some building today, or I'll do a couple of these little tasks that I left off last time or whatever. It's a decent time, however much time you got to put into it. The not so good stuff then. There is some premium content, like I mentioned last time, and it does aim to kind of prey on the mobile game FOMO, because it's a refreshing like premium store. And it's got a handful of big ticket items every week, and there's no timeline for when items might return. So the push is absolutely to ensnare people who see maybe a life-size Pizza Planet from Toy Story for $5, and you go, oh, well, I've only got £4 worth of currency from completing in-game tasks, so I could just top up and get it now. You know, neither me or Georgia has fallen to this practice.
Well done.
But if you're the sort of item completionist in a game like this, it is worth bearing in mind.
Hello
because
there.
yeah because it is there.
I'm going to be thinking about that in-game Pizza Planet.
Yeah
I'll see it when I close my eyes tonight.
It's hard not to. The game also has these kind of Fortnite inspired season pass events, And it follows normally, I think, a big content drop. So the most recent one, just before I bought the game, was the addition of like some Monsters Inc. characters and quests. And it added quite a lot of free stuff, and that was just part of the game. But it's also complemented with these like time-limited items that you can unlock for in-game task money, but only for a limited time. And again, they're all unlockable through play. You can just, if you play it every day, you'll probably get everything, and that's fine. But if your playtime is limited, again, you might feel bullied into thinking, I really want Sully's varsity jacket or some other kind of nonsense. And because you see that window sort of getting closer to closing, you sort of might go, well, I could just pay a couple quid and just grab it now. And that's absolutely what it is there to do. That is 100% why it's there. And I don't like either of these things. And both of these premium sections are completely ignorable. You know, they're off in a separate menu, but they are there. And you could argue that maybe this sort of thing is what allows the developer to add new quests and characters and realms to the base game experience. But equally, I'd just rather pay a few quid to have all the stuff. Yeah. You know, I've always been a big proponent of saying, if they put more work in and they'd like £5 more for £5 more of stuff, I'm probably going to do that. Yeah. Because I understand it takes work and people deserve to be paid. But at the moment, it's still this idea that it's like, oh, it's just that little niggle that it's like, yeah, but my Mike Wazowski is missing a hat.
Yeah.
And whereas if it was just pay a tenner up front, you get all this gear, then I'd go, yeah, okay, I like that hat.
Yeah.
that kind of thing. You know, it's especially true, I think, considering Gameloft have already released a premium paid expansion. So clearly that's an idea as well. The expansion was called A Rift in Time. I got it as part of the package that I bought on Steam when it was on sale anyway, so I haven't thought anything's been missing or not for having it or not. It is worth the money. I think it adds an entirely new map, new game mechanics. There's mini games, characters, quests, items. There's tons of stuff. But it is odd that it all exists in the same game economy as something saying, do you want that Pizza Planet? To have like a premium thing where you get all this extra stuff, just put it in there. Put it in there and I'll gladly unlock it through in-game tasks. I do really like this game. I think it's a legitimately excellent, very cozy, very kind of nourishing game. If you're a Disney fan, there's probably loads to love. I've never cared less, really, but it's fun enough for me, even as a Disney heathen. Yeah. Because the core loop of the game is just really satisfying. And once you start playing, it can be very hard to stop because the process of clearing and planting or harvesting or building or decorating or fetch questing, it never stops being fun. And the rewards are so consistent and tangible that you're always having someone pat you on the back and go like, oh, just get a few more carrots. You're only 5 more from another little ding dong. And that constant kind of promise is really, really alluring. What happens as well, you might log on to quickly finish a quest and think, okay, I've got 5 minutes. I'll just do that thing I didn't finish yesterday. But then on the way to the quest, you get sidetracked into serving Goofy a dish in Remy's restaurant just because you happen to have the right ingredients at that moment. And then you might get sidetracked again because Goofy starts saying, do you want to play a game of Scramble Coin? Which is like an in-game board game thing. Then
He'd be shit at that.
Yeah, he's a dullard. He's a dunce, isn't he?
Yeah.
But then you get sidetracked again because you realise, oh, if I won one more round of this game with someone else in town, I'm going to get a new character piece. So then you go off finding someone. Then you get sidetracked again because you're walking to find, one of the lads from Frozen who says, oh, there's a gem over there you can harvest if you want. Then Merlin pops up and you're not going to say hello to Merlin. All this stuff just happens. It's just constant and it's very hard to stop because every time you think you're done, you realise you've started something else. And watching Georgia play has been really fascinating because it's one thing to get swept up in a game yourself when you're not always aware of that loop because it's just happening to you. But when you're watching someone else, like the other night, she'd finished, she said, planting some crops about 10 p.m. She said, I'm just going to do this last bit and then we can go to bed. And then the next thing we know, it's midnight, so a few hours later, and she's frantically looking for ingredients to give to Ursula from The Little Mermaid to lift a hex. So we don't know how we got from one point to the other, but she just got swept along that way. So we didn't go to bed.
What a poor unfortunate soul.
Hey, we just carried on playing. So if you can put up with kind of the premium stuff, I think it's a really good time. Alternatively, like I mentioned last week, if you have access to Apple Arcade, you can have the version of the game with all the expansion stuff, just without that premium shop. So that is an option for people that don't want the kind of allure of extra bits that you can't have or might not want to have. So whatever platform you choose to play it on, it is a good time. There's the Apple Arcade version if you want the slightly more sanitized version that's not going to be predatory. And for everyone else, it's available everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. But yeah, I like it a lot. I like it a lot.
I need to get a good controller set up for my map because
Yeah.
I downloaded it and started playing it. Tried to do mouse keyboard control.
Yeah.
It was horrid. So I just need to pair one of my dual senses to it.
Yeah.
I've got like 4 of them. Don't use them. I've only
Why
got
have you
2
got so
hands.
many?
I
Why have you got so many?
I don't know. I think Pip ate the knobs of one, and I just like I tried
Pip is the dog.
Yeah. And I bought some little like thumbstick covers to sort of stick on.
Yeah.
And it sort of works. It's enough. Yeah. It would be fine to give to like a third player.
Yeah.
But so I think so I think I've got 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. 6 Switch controllers.
Yeah.
Bonkers. Stupid.
Love the Switch.
Dude. Right. Next
Games.
Chunk. I believe it was on the same day that I finished Balatro that my copy...
What? Who is in the audience of our podcast?
I don't know.
It's just 2 people and 1 in the audience.
I've no idea. Can I see? People. I mean, there's...
It's just host and guest on my list.
Yeah, which it should be...
Can you see anyone else on your drop down?
Nope. No, that's weird.
Well, if anyone is watching, enjoy it.
Yeah, live stream. I mean, it's all turned off, so
yeah,
it might just be classing you as audience.
Or it's odd.
I don't know.
Maybe. Anyway, sorry. Carry on.
That's right.
Carry on.
Message all audience. What? Yeah, so it does say there's 1 in the audience.
There's no chat though, is there? Is there a chat?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, that's how I've seen it. Yeah, it says everyone 3 people.
Oh, but then if I hover over 3, it says Wisdom Loneliness host and 1 in audience.
Yeah,
so maybe I am the 1.
No, I don't know.
Maybe Riverside just doesn't do 2.
It says the same for me. It says like you and an audience. It's weird. Make yourself known. Typing.
Who is it?
Nah, not really.
Oh, Jonathan.
We'll see.
I reckon Casper's just snuck in. Casper's in the background.
Well, I mean, he could be, but Casper would just join the...
Yeah, as a guest.
Yeah. And he'd be very welcome. Yeah, he's going to record some clips for...
That'd be good.
Yeah, because I was thinking, like, saying about, like, chatting about stuff that's actually current and talked about and all of that stuff.
Well, people don't want to hear about Puzzle Quest.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting. But I thought that'd be good content.
Yeah.
He's got some big opinions.
Yeah. Well.
Right, here we go. I believe it was on the same day that I sort of checked Balatro off as finished that my copy of the Dark Souls Trilogy Compendium arrived from Future Press Publishing.
Nice.
It is a beautiful tome indexing literally everything in all 3 Dark Souls games and their respective DLCs. It's got all the flavour text for all the items and weapons, details on all the enemies and bosses, extensive maps for all of the areas and their secrets. Also, a brilliant section on the story and lore and how it all ties together. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And now I'm desperate to own more of their books. I specifically love the Sekiro Compendium and also the double volume Elden Ring one. The Sekiro one is now out of print, costs a fortune on eBay, so I'm hoping for an anniversary reprint of that one day. And I'm also hoping that they release a complete Elden Ring Compendium after the DLC has been released in a couple of months' time.
It's soon, isn't it? Yeah, I was going to say I saw an advert.
And then hopefully I can add them to my shelf. Little box set of all 3. Oh my god, I'd love them. They're so beautiful. They're terrible for me. Terrible. Oh, if I've got any money left after moving house.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is all to say that leafing through this weighty tome got me right in the mood to play a Dark Souls game again, and I hadn't played Dark Souls 2 in almost 4 years, because my first and only playthrough of that game was done in the depths of many nights with my little newborn Nora sleeping in a sling around me.
Yes, yeah.
So I booted up Dark Souls 2 on the Steam Deck, which looks and runs so nicely, and it wasn't long before I was back in the swing of things. I started to remember certain things about my previous playthrough. One of those things was how much of a great time I had playing a large section of the game in co-op with just random people online that I just chanced to be paired up with. And I distinctly remember how comforting I found it, especially in the dead of the night, on my own, with my daughter, in the middle of a pandemic. It felt very reassuring just to have some people to magically summon to provide me with support against seemingly insurmountable odds. And I started to feel my enthusiasm wane for my current playing through, as the servers weren't massively active, and summoning some company to try and sort of recreate that original Dark Souls 2 experience I had just wasn't really happening. And I don't know, I just really yearned for some co-op. I'd also started a new playthrough of the brilliant and beautiful Children of Mortar, the roguelike, on my Steam Deck, so I could play some co-op with friend of the show Thomas, but my evenings gobbled up but with my evenings gobbled up with house moving admin, I just haven't been able to find time to actually try that out with him yet. But I'm really looking forward to, because it's such a good game, and I think co-op would be just really, really good fun in it. So I checked in with another friend of the show, occasional co-host and friend IRL, Casper, saying, I said to him, look, I'm really longing for a good co-op experience, something in the Souls-like vein. And he suggested that we play Salt and Sacrifice together. And Salt and Sacrifice is the sequel to Salt and Sanctuary, which is a very moody 2D Souls-like Metroidvania, both of which are in my Switch library. And whereas you could summon co-op players in the first game and play locally, the sequel had it much more integrated with online co-op and I think sort of like Monster Hunter-like match-up play. And I just really started to get a hankering for playing this. Casper, however, still had Final Fantasy VII Re-Shake,
something.
I don't know, whatever it's called, Re-something. Re-Shake. He still had that to finish, so I decided to play through Salt and Sanctuary in the meantime, because I'd never actually played it properly, which is a bit mad, because it is, on paper at least, just a nailed-on Jonathan Dunn game, and I knew I'd really enjoy it. I often get this thing when I finish a Souls-like game that I immediately want to play another one, but then a few hours into playing another one, I realise I'm not a sadist, and I probably want a break. And like Salt and Sanctuary got this treatment at least twice before, but I thought it was actually just a good time to do it properly. Something I bounced off originally when I first played Salt and Sanctuary is that it bafflingly doesn't have a map system in the game. And no map. And this is an obvious allusion to the fact that From Software's Souls-like games don't have maps in them, until Elden Ring, of course. But when you've got worlds created in 3D, you have a much better sense of location and perspective and orientation than you do when you're just on a 2D plane. And especially when there are Metroidvania elements to the game, with areas gated behind unlockable mechanics and abilities, it can be so difficult to remember where all these are, and which sections branch off into which, and where everything is in relation to each other. Like, it didn't really bother me too much in terms of playing through the game, although I did get lost a few times and stuck to know which paths I hadn't been down. But like the main drawback was that when I was coming to the end game, and usually at this point in a Metroidvania, I would check out my map and look at all the little blank spaces that I hadn't explored and go and tick them off. Hopefully find some cool secrets or some badass weapons, or even like just whole new areas and optional bosses to battle. But because I didn't have that reference point to go on with this game, I just didn't want to bother doing it, because one, it would be annoying.
Sorry.
Thanks. Because one, it would be, I don't know, just a bit annoying, just to go and just keep running into dead ends. And two, I knew then I wouldn't get a sense of closure, because I wouldn't know if I'd actually done everything or not. You know?
You're absolutely map pilled.
Yeah, I mean,
in the pocket of Big Map.
Yeah, like there's loads of obviously maps online that you can look at and stuff, but I was just a bit, I don't know. Yeah, it is a small quibble in the grand scheme of things, because I had a fantastic time playing through it. Like, I rolled credits after about, I don't know, 16, 17 hours. It's such a good game. It looks really, really nice. It plays beautifully, especially on the Switch OLED, because everything's in pretty much in black and white.
Soupy.
It's got great combat. It's got really good design. It's got great upgrade system. All the design of the bosses and the enemies are really, really nice. Obviously, it's not like massively original in terms of what influences it's mashing together, but it does execute them really, really well. And it has thoroughly whetted my appetite for what's to come in Salt and Sacrifice, which hopefully I'll be making a start on very, very soon. And I'm looking forward to that and a proper co-op experience.
Salty.
Round the world in 80 days. Games.
I like it. I like the song. Brazil.
We're in Brazil.
Yeah, boy.
We're in Brazil. Who'd have thought it? Not me. I mean, but I've done my research. And
Good.
I'm looking forward to talking about Brazilian games. But before we do that, do you want to know some facts about Brazil?
This is the highlight of every one of my months now going forward for however many years we do this.
I'm so sorry for you.
please teach me about Brazil in a way that only you can.
Okay. I found out some genuinely really interesting things here.
Yeah?
First of all, good stat, the largest concert in history was held on the Copacabana beach in Brazil, where 3.5 million people came out to see who in 1994.
94. 3.5 million people.
3.5 million people.
Oh, I haven't got a fucking clue. Is it someone? Oh, hang on. No,
What were you going to say?
I don't want to.
Shaggy.
Was it actually Shaggy?
No.
I was going to say. No, who was it?
Rod Stewart. Of all people.
That's much funnier than anything I could have said.
About 60% of the Amazon rainforest is in Brazil, and there are over 45,000 different species of animal living in there. There are also over 100 tribes in the Amazon rainforest that have never had contact with outside civilization.
That's crazy.
Here's a really cool fact. If you're in a Brazilian prison, you can reduce your sentence by 4 days for every book that you read.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
That's a weird way of doing a literacy program, but it's got to be quite successful.
Probably. Apart from all of those really sadistic people that just love to read, just get them out sooner. The smart ones are the ones you've got to worry about, right?
Yeah, keep them in.
Yeah, if anything. Yeah, Jesus.
Maybe there's a cap, depending on how many books are actually available. And there might be a system where it's like, you've read that, you're going to get half credit this time.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's true.
How do you test? How do you test
diminishing returns? Just kill them. And of course, a Brazilian wax can only be known as a Brazilian wax if you get your pubic hair waxed off in Brazil. Otherwise, it should technically be known as a sparkling rip. Stupid.
Oh, silly boy. Silly boy.
What about games, Chris? Tell me about Brazilian games.
Oh, okay then. I'm going to be up front here and say that a proper rundown.
Have you played loads of games? Have you played like Brazilian games?
I'm going to be up front here and say that a proper rundown of Brazil's gaming history and general relationship with video games is genuinely outside the scope of what I'm able to put together as a teacher who just likes playing games in his spare time. Because in Brazil, there are socioeconomic and socio-political reasons for, say, the reason why the Sega Master System persisted in the country for so many decades beyond the early 90s when it was basically sunset everywhere else. There's reasons why the PS2 still sells quite well, even when there are much newer machines available to purchase. there's import taxes, there's trade relationships, there's licensing, there's sub-licensing. I'm not a bright enough man to really pick these things apart in a little 5-minute section on a games and comedy podcast. I can't do it. What I can tell you, though, is that some of these decisions are the reasons why Tectoy, which is Sega's main partner in Brazil, developed and published a hilariously truncated Duke Nukem 3D for the Mega Drive in 1998.
Know that.
It is the reason why there is a Doom mod created by someone called Marcos Sergeant Mark IV Abanante, called Brutal Doom, which has been in active development for over 15 years and has, at time of writing, been downloaded over 6 million times.
Wow.
It is why...
Say that, Rod Stewart.
Yeah, fuck you, Rod. It's why Sao Paulo-based Fepard Games went from making Sonic fan games, like After the Sequel and Chrono Adventure, to nowadays having a pretty solid indie career with the Spark the Electric Jester series, which is now on its 3rd entry, I think. It's also the reason why the Zeebo, a home console based on Java phone tech from the mid-2000s, launched exclusively in Brazil in the year 2009 before being swiftly discontinued.
Wow, that's bleak.
Yeah, I mean, for this story in particular, I would highly, highly recommend going and watching a huge breakdown of the machine and its games on the YouTube channel called Stop Skeletons from Fighting. They did some really excellent research into kind of like what it was, where it came from, and did a deep dive into every game. It's really genuinely great stuff and just fascinating because, again, there is too much to cover in a little aside like this. Notable games from the country, though, I can do that, if for no other reason than it's a lot easier to pass a little Wikipedia list of notable games developed in Brazil than it is to offer impartial thoughts on 30 plus years of global commerce and relationships. So, Devolver digital darlings like the highly recommended Slacker 'em Up, Sludge Life, and its sequel that I played quite recently, really good, came from Brazil. The even more highly recommended roguelite called Heavy Bullets that has you collecting every fired round from the ground, and you have to manually reload your gun with those bullets. That came from Brazil. And the Chris hasn't played it, but I hear it's good. Disc Room comes from Brazil as well. So some good stuff that Devolver have published all came from there. A team called... oh, dear. A team called Joy Masher, who are developers of excellent Contra and Ninja Gaiden throwback 2D action games like Onikan and Odalis and Blazing Chrome and Vengeful Guardian Moonrider. They're a 2-person team from Brazil, and although I've not played Vengeful Guardian, I can absolutely vouch for the 3 prior games from this team. They're really good kind of 8-bit and 16-bit throwback games, hard as nails action games, very crunchy, satisfying stuff, lovely pixel art, really cool stuff. The Momodora Metroidvania games, which I was shocked you hadn't played, are from Brazil, though I'm sure if he hasn't already got to them, we could easily commission a friend of the show and self-proclaimed Metroidvaniac Casper to give us a few thoughts if we wanted to find out more about them. Sticking to a genre theme.
Come into the Discord and ask him.
Sticking to a genre theme, Dandara, another well-received Metroidvania, is also Brazilian developed, and notably it uses the real-life Dandara dos Palmares, an Afro-Brazilian freedom fighter from the 17th century, as its inspiration. So that's quite cool as well.
Brilliant.
The Ubisoft-published Imagine series that littered Nintendo bargain bins in the DS and Wii era were apparently almost all developed in Brazil.
1 second. Just going back to Dandara.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm sort of on the lookout for with this whole format of the show and doing around the world in 80 games are games that feel like they're from the place where they're developed.
Yeah.
Like it's annoying that like the New Zealand story
it's Japanese.
not a New Zealand game, or like Guacamole is not Mexican. Things like Dandara actually being built on actual sort of Brazilian history, I think is just it's just really, really great. So I'm on the lookout for games that are definitely from the country.
Do you know what? I can tell you would not know it's from Brazil. The Ubisoft published Imagine series that littered Nintendo bargain bins in the DS and Wii era, because they were apparently almost all developed by Ubisoft Sao Paulo, who were sadly shuttered as DS sales diminished and people got bored of playing hits like Imagine Party Babies and Imagine Teacher School Trip.
I don't want to imagine that.
Now, all these games I've listed, we didn't play any of these for the episode. even if researching did make me boot up Duke Nukem 3D on the Mega Drive for the first time in about 15 years, because I did play that a long time ago when I thought it was just a home ROM hack project.
Yeah.
And it was only later that I realised, no, this was a genuinely licensed, sanctioned thing. Really interesting. Bad game, but interesting. But what did you choose to play, Senor Dunn, from Brazil?
Well, I was deliberating what to pick because I initially wanted to see if I could play something from my library to save me buying something this month. And I saw that I did have Heavy Bullets in my Steam library, probably gifted from you at some point.
Probably.
But unfortunately, I couldn't get it to run. I couldn't get it to run on my Mac, despite it having Mac support, because of the outdated 32-bit only support of the game. And my lack of love of tinkering just couldn't get it running on my Steam Deck either, which was just really annoying because I really wanted to play it, but I couldn't even get past the menu. Then I also wanted to play Dandara and Mamadora. They're definitely going to be up my street, but they were definitely not up my library. Then not yet anyway. They are now on my wish list.
Yeah.
And then I saw that Knights of Pen and Paper was both in my library and developed in Brazil. And it was also a game that I had wanted to play, so I was pleased to have the opportunity to do so. Knights of Pen and Paper sees you arrive at a digital Dungeons and Dragons-esque table hosted by a resident... Hosted? Knights of Pen and Paper sees you arrive at a digital Dungeons and Dragons-esque table hosted by a resident dungeon master. You create your character, you choose your class, you add 2 or 3 companions, and your dungeon master will then conjure the scene before you to start your adventure. You start in a village, obviously. You're given a quest to kill some rats, and the game teaches you the ropes of how your play sessions will likely unfold. You get to choose pretty much what type of quest you embark upon, and then, within reason, get to customise how hard it will be, which is easily done for the more combat-based quests. You can simply choose how many foes you take on at any one time. If you're not feeling too confident or you're feeling a little bit underpowered, you can just take out 1 rat at a time until you've cleared all 7 that you need to tick off to quest. You need to tick the quest off your list. Or if you're suitably powered up, wanting more of a challenge, or simply in a rush, you could summon several of them to take on at once. The battles in Knights of Pen and Paper play out literally every other RPG ever made, with you just being able to choose a physical attack, a magical attack, defending, fleeing, healing your party members. It's certainly not revolutionary. You survive, you tick off a quest, and then you can travel to other areas to do other quests, or find treasure in caves, or escort people to various locations. And when you're travelling around, you always roll a dice, very Dungeons and Dragons-y, if you to see if you will encounter enemies to fight en route, and then you'll see what you're made of, because you can't choose what this setup will be like you can with other combat encounters. It's all pretty derivative stuff, but that's okay, because the game knows this and it leans into it with its writing, which is really witty. It's very meta, and it's got nice self-referential dialogue options. A decent twist on the otherwise standard setup sees you buy things to customize your playing table with, from adding ornaments and trinkets, which will then add a certain buff to the game. Or you can change the rug on the floor or the door to the room to add other sort of gameplay twists. And this brings me on to the way that spending money works in Knights of Pen and Paper. You get gold for winning battles and completing quests, and you can spend it on a new weapon, or upgrading your weapons, or buying things for your table. But it also costs money to travel to places, so if you've spent your money on stuff, you might have to stay put and generate some battles before you have enough money to travel somewhere else again. However, if one of your party falls in battle, you have to pay to revive them before you can continue, and depending on where this happens, it can leave you in a really tricky situation. So you could get stranded in a location that only has reasonably powerful enemies to spawn in battle. Losing one member of your party can often then snowball, with you just massively under-supported and seeing your other members fall alongside them. You may then not have the money to revive them or travel to an easier location, so you have to try and slowly take on one enemy at a time with maybe one character to earn money to revive the other characters until you earn enough to travel and continue with your quest. And it is a process that is not only boring, but deeply frustrating because the game, whilst being a premium game, now feels like it's a freemium game, and it's annoying. It's just where it attempts to just annoy you into spending real money to speed things up or take a few shortcuts. And the reason I found myself in this particular predicament was because I was trying to mine ore to upgrade my blacksmith, to upgrade my weapons. The way the blacksmith works is you spend money to upgrade a weapon, but unless you upgrade the blacksmith, this only has a 30% chance of working, meaning you could just chuck 200 gold their way and he goes,
you get
whoops,
nothing.
Yeah, fuck all, sorry. And like upgrading the blacksmith then only increases this chance of success just by a few percent. So if you're wanting to mine ore to upgrade him as much as possible, and then you're into this whole exploring, spending, dying, reviving loop that really sucks the fun out of the game, like it's a shame because it's a nice game to play. It's well written. It's got some fun ideas, but because of the way the game is set up, I just totally ran aground on it. Totally ran aground. And because so much of like the leveling up of my party came from just purely from grinding, I was like, and how you just do not get into a situation where you've got like regular income of money. Like my instinct would be to be like, you know what? Now that I've got a handle on how this game works, I'm just going to start a new file. I'm going to start a new file and just set up my characters again in a way that I know is going to be just a bit more effective. But then I'm just setting myself up for like another 10 hours of grinding, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. You know,
the rats have won.
The rats have won. There's a really weird system in the game as well that I never really got my head around how it sort of worked or how to potentially exploit it. But like, if you start a new save file, you share certain things. So if I just start a new game, new characters, I've got the same unlocks of like the table ornaments and trinkets and all of that stuff. That's all unlocked, and that's sort of understandable because that feels a little bit like a sort of like a roguelite development. But you also share your gold.
So you start with nothing.
Well, not if you've got another save file. If I'm playing a game and I've got 200 gold in my bank, I start another save file, I've got that money. So it's potential that you could just keep making accounts to like
getting more money.
Do the first few quests to get money to spend in. I don't know if it's like I like I said, I found out about that when I was looking for sort of like some tips on how to quickly level up, and I was like, just feels a bit, I don't know. I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. Thoughtless, I think is the word.
Thoughtless. That's a really harsh review of a game. Yeah, something about that word on its own. Like, is about the most brutal thing you can say. I played a game and it felt thoughtless.
There is a second Knights of Pen and Paper game, which it wasn't actually developed by the same people in Brazil. And that was released as a freemium game as well as a premium version. And you can get the Knights of Pen and Paper 2 on iOS. You used to be able to get the first one. But I downloaded the free version of Knights and Pen and Paper 2 just to give it a whirl on my phone because I didn't want to buy the premium version of it if it wasn't justified.
Yeah.
And it's clear that this pay-to-win or pay-to-progress model is what's at the heart of these games rather than a well-balanced gameplay experience.
Ick.
The team in Brazil did make a sci-fi version of this game called Galaxy of Pen and Paper, which looks to do just the exact same thing, but with guns instead of swords and aliens instead of goblins. But unfortunately, after my fairly tawdry time with Knights and Pen and Paper, I don't really have the inclination to play that game either. It's a shame that, like, yeah, it's had like a few different sort of releases now because it was released on mobile and then it got like a console version called like the +1 definitive something, I don't know. And I'm hoping that it gets it feels like the sort of game that would come to like a plus version would come to Apple Arcade, and I might be able to give it a bit more of a casual play, and just I'm not just like sitting down for a session with it on the Steam Deck. and I just, to dip into it every night or something. But yeah, I don't know. I had a bit of an average experience all in all, and it's a bit of a shame. One of the guys on the Discord has played it and has got like right up to like the final quest in it, and has said that it's just so unbelievably brutal. It's just taking him forever. Maybe he's got some more thoughts on how to enjoy this game in ways that I overlooked. But
join the Discord and find out.
Yeah. What have you played, Chris? What did you play?
I played a good game.
Good.
I like racing games quite a bit, and Brazil's development scene doesn't seem to be inundated with racers. But luckily, one of their most notable franchises is a banger, because Horizon Chase Turbo is from Brazil, and it's a game I really like. It's a game, it first entered my consciousness when I was obsessively collecting physical games, not just for the Switch, which I still do, but for any and all platforms. So Horizon Chase Turbo, although very accessible these days, both physically or digitally, it had its first limited print hard copy release exclusively in Brazil, and that's incredibly uncommon. It just doesn't happen. And as I've alluded to already, import tax in the region meant that import tax in the region means that modern releases don't always find much of a foothold in Brazil. But being homegrown, maybe Horizon was able to make use of some tax breaks or something to get its first limited run in that region. I genuinely don't know. But either way, at the time, I imported a copy for the PS4 to the UK at sizable cost. And I enjoyed it a fair bit on my PS4 Pro, because I think Horizon Chase Turbo is one of the only games that aims for a native 4K on that machine. Like, it's not an upscaled thing. It just runs at 4K. Then, naturally, a week later, it feels like I watched as it got a regular UK retail release on the PS4, on the Switch, on everything else.
Yeah.
Like, not that far down the line. So I sold my PS4 copy at a huge loss, bought the Switch copy, happy days. Horizon Chase Turbo, it riffs on the rolling roads of Outrun. It riffs on the vanishing point track design of games like Top Racer on the Super Nintendo. And it's got a little bit of the flat polygon shading of Virtua Racer as well, for good measure, just to really make me happy at least. But it's a really addictive arcade racer with tracks and cars and content all coming out of its ears. It's a very generous game. Never afraid of its inspirations, developer Aquiris go all out to try and trade on, particularly a nostalgic fondness for Top Racer, the game I just mentioned on the SNES, because it drafts in that game's Scottish composer, Barry Leach, who comes back from the 90s to make a new soundtrack which sounds about as close to the original as it could have, whilst not infringing his own copyright. It's a nice time. Most tracks ask that you beat like a pack of racers. They ask that you beat the race whilst collecting your track tokens. They ask that you beat a par time. And that kind of 3-star system exposes a bit of the game's mobile roots, because it originally came out on Android and iOS a few years before, when it was just called Horizon Chase. Turbo was the suffix that it got for its console ports. This isn't a bad thing at all. I've always found that system of doing a stage again, but better, that mobile games used, is pretty compelling. It's the reason why I like Angry Birds so much. But It is interesting that this is a game that went mobile to console rather than the other way around, because a lot of big games these days start off on the PC, on consoles, like, say, you mentioned Hades earlier, and then later make their way to phones or something like that. Whereas, Horizon started as a touchscreen game and then moved its way to the big boy consoles. Handling is really easy. It almost requires kind of a digital touch of a D-pad. And that, again, kind of makes sense if it begins life on touchscreen devices, because you're just doing a binary yes-no, am I touching the screen or not, sort of thing. And that works well. So to play this game, strategy really comes from preemptively sort of leaning into turns, managing your nitrous, weaving between little tight packs of rival vehicles. And it's all just really simple, satisfying stuff. I remember reading reviews at the time where people complained about the feel of the game, that it was like too on rails, or that the cars could be hard to pass because they all stick to very defined racing lines. But I genuinely feel to complain about the feel of a game like Horizon is to complain about the flavour of crisps that are written on the bag you're eating from, because it's so obvious in its inspirations. It's not meant to be a simulation racer. It's not a rally racer. It's not a drift racer. It is a game that on the box basically shouts, we really like Outrun and Top Racer. And as such, it feels about as close to those titles as it can do, whilst being polygonal 3D instead of like scaled sprites and perspective tricks. Everything else feels the same. Love it or hate it, and I know neither of us are fans, but the fixed camera perspective and tank controls of, say, an early Resident Evil game, they make those games feel a certain way. And modern survival horror, as it's been tooled in a different direction, just feels fundamentally different. And for some people, the appeal of that classic feel and look is why a game like Tormented Souls that came out a couple of years ago, or any number of other more directly PS1 referencing horror titles, they have an audience because people go, I like how it used to feel, I want more of it. And Horizon is all about trying to recapture the feeling of races of the early 90s. And it's easily, I think, the best in class at that specific feeling of racing game in kind of like modern gaming. Horizon Chase Turbo has had a few DLC drops as well since its launch in 2019. The most notable, especially because what you mentioned earlier about Dandara, is the Ayrton Senna Forever DLC.
Oh, yeah.
And that added Formula One style cars to the game and charted the career of Brazilian-born Ayrton Senna. And it is tremendously reverent to what was a national hero for the country. Like the core gameplay of Horizon doesn't really change that much in this mode, though there are a few small tweaks to like handling and race types and stuff like that. But it doesn't really matter. I think you could argue that a racing legend like Ayrton Senna would have been better serviced in a big quote here, a real racing game. But I think Horizon is actually perfect because it's a love letter to the games that the developers were likely playing in their youth. It's a love letter to the driver that they likely watched dominate Formula One in the late 80s and early 90s. And on a separate note, props to the developers too, in that when the DLC first came out on the Switch, the eShop version for the Switch wasn't compatible with the cartridge version at first. It took a while for them to iron out some kink. And I messaged them and said, I really want to play this and I can't play it. And they responded almost instantly and just said, here's a code for the game and the DLC you can just have and play today. And it really felt like for that particular expansion, they weren't doing it to make loads of money. They just did it because they have real love and respect towards a sports person who died, like, tragically, really way too young. Horizon did get a sequel last year. I haven't played it because it doesn't yet have a Steam release, because it's an Epic Store exclusive on the PC, and because the Switch port hasn't had a physical release as of yet. If either of those two things had aligned, I would have already bought it, guaranteed.
Yeah.
But I will do. If it doesn't get a physical release in the future, I will just pick it up at one stage on the Switch digitally, or I'm sure it will make its way to Steam at some point when whatever exclusivity deal is up. Because I like it a lot, big fan of this one. And I would encourage anyone who likes arcade racing games to get it played. I think it's a really, really good one. A good game from Brazil.
There we go. 2 games from Brazil. One banger, one clanger. No, it's not a clanger. Let's try and think how to link. There we go. That's Brazil. That's Brazil. Those are some games from Brazil. Oh, games. Brazilian games. Brazil games.
What? Big old bird.
Do you want to know where we're going next?
Yes.
Our next stop is to a huge country, both in terms of population, history, cultural importance, not necessarily in terms of video games development.
Okay.
It makes me very excited to explore India.
Oh, I know of 1 or 2.
I know of 2. And those are the 2 games that we're going to be playing. Because I've already played Raji, an ancient epic.
Yes,
and you need to play it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to play the Lovely Planet games. Which are these first-person games.
I had no idea they were from India. No idea.
Yeah.
They're fun. They're like speed-running platform games.
Yeah, they look really, really good. And Raji is definitely a game that is from the country. And I cannot wait for you to play it and to talk about it next month and to find out even more about this incredible country. Incredible country.
Oh, look at that. It's already in my Steam library.
Of course it is.
Of course it is.
Yeah. So there we go. That was the latest stop on our Around the World in 80 Games Odyssey. It was Brazil, and it was great.
Yes.
Join us in the Discord, chat with us, go to o3c.games, and you'll see the join link there. Chat to us on social media, at O3C Games on everything. Follow us on TikTok. We've got loads of cool stuff on there. Feel free to get in touch and tell us what games you're playing what games you want us to play, which countries you want us to visit, and we'll certainly take it into consideration. But until next time, we wish you a very happy May, and goodbye.
Farewell.
There we go. Well done.